In this video, I'll share with you a requested tutorial on how to cut a blazer dress. Now to start, I will be marking from the back pattern, which is the shoulder to bust, under bust, waist, and then the blazer length. Now, after you're done marking that, we'll move over to the upper part. On the actual blazer I'm working on, it has a shoulder pad, and if you look at the shoulder area, it extended more than the actual shoulder. So I'll mark my shoulder divided by 2 and add ½ inch for sewing allowance. Then I'll now add additional ½ inch to it at the shoulder. Why I added additional ½ inch, just like I said, you notice that the shoulder area is a bit pointy, like more than the actual shoulder, so that by the time you fix your shoulder pad to the dress, it will be giving you that standing shoulder effect at the shoulder of this dress. So for the neckline, I marked a basic neckline of 3 by 1 inch. I'll come down by 1 inch. So now, if you don't want to use this extra ½ inch I added at the sleeve, probably you don't want yours to be standing out that way, you can go ahead to mark your actual shoulder divided by 2 and add ½ inch without going ahead to add the extra ½ inch I added. After that, I marked my chest line, which is my bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. I'll go ahead to draw out a straight line at that point. Now, after drawing out a straight line, on the chest line, I will mark my actual shoulder divided by 2 and just add ½ inch because I'm adding a sleeve on this dress. While on the main shoulder part of my pattern, on the shoulder, I marked my shoulder divided by 2, added ½ inch because this dress has a sleeve, and now added an additional ½ inch. So from the shoulder, I connected back to my chest line. So just like I said, if you don't want to add that additional ½ inch to the shoulder part, you can go ahead to just use your normal shoulder and add ½ inch for joining your sleeve. Now I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. Then after that, I'll divide my armhole into 2 and come out by ½ inch. Place your curved rule, connect from your bust circumference to that ½ inch and from the ½ inch to the upper part of your shoulder. After marking, you'll find out that you have a slight protruding effect at the shoulder area. So remember, you're adding a shoulder pad to this pattern at the shoulder. But if you don't want to add a shoulder pad, just like I said, just mark your shoulder divided by 2 plus extra ½ inch. Now I'll be marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2. I'll mark it on the bust, on the waist, and on the hip point. So we are marking a blazer. You don't necessarily need your underbust, but I'll still outline my underbust for the front part. Now I'll draw a straight line connecting those lines. Here I'll mark ½ inch here and mark ½ inch here. Now I'll come down by 1 inch from the bust, place my ruler, and I will connect. Also connect at the other side of my pattern. Now I'm going to come down by 4 inches here, and I'll connect my dart. So for the back pattern of this dress, I didn't get to see the back. If you also want to make this a princess dart, you can do that, or you can just leave it as a basic back pattern. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4 and just add 1 inch for sewing allowance. For a blazer, you don't need much sewing allowance on your pattern. So I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measure this dart intake that I will sew out, replace and add my sewing allowance. Here I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4 and add a sewing allowance. Now going to the lower part, normally when I'm making a blazer, I just leave it straight. But if you look at the actual pattern I'm working on, you notice that at the lower part is fitted. Now I will mark my hip circumference divided by 4 and take out 1.5 inches or 1 inch from it. Then I will now mark my sewing allowance. Now, just like I said, for the sewing allowance, you don't need much sewing allowance. You can just add 1 inch. Even if you want to add much, you can just go in by 1.5. This is a blazer, so most of the sewing allowance is inside between the main fabric and the lining. So you don't want the inside to be too bulky. So I'll just connect my pattern. And also when you're connecting for your blazer, make sure that the hip point is not too pointy, because all the sewing you'll be doing is inside, so that the side will not have ear and it will relax towards the hip area. Now after I'm done connecting this, I'll go ahead to cut out this pattern. But before cutting out, I'll measure the neckline of the back, which I have about 3.5 inches. Now this neckline, we are going to connect it to the front part of this pattern to cut out the collar of the blazer gown. So I'll just go ahead and I'll cut this out. After cutting this out, I'll be using this same pattern to trace that of the front pattern. But for the front pattern, I will be adding an addition at the front. Now, you notice this blazer has like a wrap effect also at the front, like it's overlapping on each other on both sides. Now, if you're making this for someone that is slim, you can add an addition of 3 to 4 inches in front. While if you're making for a plus size person, you can use 4 to 5 inches so that this can easily overlap on both sides of the person's body very well. Now, I marked about 3.5 inches for mine, and what I did was to just go ahead to use my pencil to trace out the exact shape of this pattern, that is the back pattern on the front pattern, instead of going ahead to cut this pattern again. This will save us time. Now, after cutting this, I'm going to go ahead to place my pattern back, mark my bust, my waist, and my hip area. So I'll be making reference to this part of my pattern when I'm cutting out the front. So I'll just go ahead and place my ruler, and I'm going to go ahead to outline all these lines before we go ahead to start cutting or start marking out the blazer pattern. Now, the next step I'm going to take is to go ahead to mark the dart. I'll start by marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2 also. Now, I didn't really see the front part of this dress. If you zoom it, I don't really know if it's a princess dart, but looking at what we have there, it's more like a basic dart. So I'm just going to go ahead to mark a basic dart here, just like we did for the front. I'll place my ruler and I'm going to connect all this pattern. I'll come down by 1 inch here, mark ½ inch on both sides of my waistline, and I'll come down by 4 inches here. After marking that, I'm going to connect this all the way up and also connect at the other side. Connect towards that 4 inches I came down from, and also connect to the other side of my pattern. Now, after I'm done marking this, I'll extend my front neckline to a basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches. This will serve as a guide when I'm cutting out my pattern. Now, remember, just like we said, we are going to have an extension at the front part. So I'll be adding that later, and I'll go ahead to trace out the armhole and the side pattern of my dress. And after we are done doing this, I will go ahead to add an additional pattern paper at the top, because we are going to use it to cut out the collar of this dress, which will start from the front and also extend to the back. Now, I will also make reference to the 3 by 1 inches neckline we have at the back, which I measured. I'll go ahead and outline a line here, draw a line here. That will be our starting point, and make sure it's touching the neckline of your front pattern. So after I'm done marking this, right, I'll go ahead and mark that extension, that is that 3.5 inches we measured for the back neckline. I'll mark a straight line and connect. From that line, I'll come out by ½ inch and I'll tilt this in. This is so that the collar is going to relax when you cut it out or when you wear your dress. So from here, you're going to determine how wide you want your neckline to be. You can use 3 inches, 3.5, because what we have there is not that much. Or probably if you want yours to be bigger, you can use 4 inches. Place my tape and I'll mark my shoulder to underbust. I'm going to be making reference to that part of my pattern, and I'm going to go ahead to draw out a straight line there. Now, from the neckline, I'm going to connect down to the underbust, because if you look at the wrap blazer we have, it is sloped towards the underbust area or close to that point. Now, I'll just go ahead and I'll connect this, and make sure your line is not too curvy. Make sure that your line at least is a straight slanted line, and I'll connect it to that my front extension. Now, from that neckline width, I'm going to go ahead to draw out. So what we have there is slightly curved. So I'll just try my possible best to like draw out a curved shape here. Now, I'll try to curve this down, going towards the underbust area of my pattern this way, right? So If you're not okay with what I have here, you can always blend your own out or adjust your pattern before going ahead to cut. There's always room for adjustment before going ahead to transfer your pattern to your main fabric, right? So I'll just go ahead and I'll trace this out. So after cutting this out now, I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to outline this to make it more visible for you to see. If you have any question concerning this pattern drafting, please go ahead to also ask your question. So I'll just try and blend here off because it's looking a bit deep, and then I'll go ahead to outline the rest of my pattern and we'll be cutting it out. But now, before going to cut it out, we are going to work on the lower part. Now you notice from this part of your pattern going towards the waistline area or slightly towards the waistline, it is slightly straight. Now from this point, you start slanting it all the way going towards the side, right? So from the actual measurement before that extension, you can use 1 inch or 1.5 inches because what we have there is not that deep, like it's just a little space in between. Now I'll just go ahead to outline and I'll blend out some of the line, or I'll go ahead to readjust it. Now for this pattern, you'll be cutting out 2 pieces of this pattern, right? Because 2 of them will be overlapping each other. And after this, I'll just make this drawing to indicate we have a button at this part of the pattern, and I'll go ahead to cut it out. So this is more like a wrap blazer dress. It's going to overlap each other on both sides. So now for this collar piece, you're going to join it up together and you're going to attach it to the back neckline of your dress. So if you open up your collar, you can just slant it in this way. So I just feel that this part of my collar is not well blended, so you can just go ahead to recorrect it when you're cutting yours out. So after that, I'll just go ahead and cut out my pattern. So after cutting this pattern now, this is what I have. Just like I said, you'll be cutting this on fold. That means you'll be cutting out 2 patterns, one for this side and one for the other side of this pattern. So after cutting it, when you're cutting the lining part, now you're going to share your pattern into 2, right? So I'll draw a fence line to indicate, right? Now this part of your dress will have like your normal suit lining, and going towards the other half of this blazer will have like your crepe fabric, right? So that when you go ahead to turn this part, that is turn your dress and the collar area, what you'll be having this at this part will be the crepe, the main fabric you're using to make the dress.